What an intro. I was gossiping with my Microsoft buddies back there. Did he talk about getting drunk on continents? He did, didn't he? Hey. So I'm Tim. So happy to be here at DEVintersection, and thanks for coming out tonight. My job for the next 30 minutes is to get you all fired up about technology and what's coming in the future in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning and stuff like that. If you've seen me talk before, you know I'm all about Visual Studio and demos, so we'll do a lot of that tonight. But I got to get through a few slides to set all this up. So, wow, I must have gray hair because look at all those fancy titles. That doesn't mean anything. Neither does this really, but Tim Huckabee 10, 15 years ago was skinny and was the guy you never noticed because he was always standing next to the big guy on stage. So yeah, I worked on some server teams at Microsoft a long time ago. Really fun. That's where I learned how to build professional software. That's kind of the inspiration for my career. Let me get through this quickly so we can get to demos. You don't know the Internology name. I'm the figurehead of 3 companies. Internology would be the best known, and you don't know their name. You probably know them from the presidential election and the broadcast TV software and CNN and NBC and some other networks. You know, if you see somebody like John King or Wolf Blitzer touching a screen, that's us. But we build software for other companies. You don't know the Internology name. We build software for most of the Fortune 1000, including our good friends in Redmond, Washington, and their competitors in the Silicon Valley and Cupertino. It's a cool company, but it's custom app dev. The marketing people want me to show you famous people using our software. There's famous people using our software. Happy birthday. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. This is what I'm excited about. I'm going to talk about computer vision. And I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to demo, and I'm going to show you where we are today and where we're going. And I think you're going to shake your head. And I know you're probably here for the Office keynote. Dan and Mike are here, great speakers, going to be a great keynote. But I promise you, you will be doing this stuff one day. This AI stuff is so prevalent and so powerful, it's just going to appear in your lives. And I'll put that into context. We'll talk a little bit about what AI means and machine learning, but from a high level. And then demos, if I can ever get through this setup. So let me give you a little background in case you're not in this world. Virtual reality I really don't care about, only because I'm so old I don't really play computer games at all anymore. Virtual reality is where you're occluded with a headset and you don't see anything except for the game, like the Oculus Rift device, right? What I am really into is augmented reality. And that would be if you point your cell phone, I don't know, at Lake Mead and all the fish that live in there just kind of come up in 3D space. MR, mixed reality, is kind of a Microsoft-generated term, but it is wearing a headset like a HoloLens device, being able to drive because you can see the world, just interactive holograms appear in your world and have awareness of space. So, I'm like most San Diegans, I'm from Los Angeles, but Tony Gwynn is a famous baseball player who died from cancer, hero of mine. The HoloLens, Tony could be sitting, or his hologram could be sitting right there. I could ask him to get up and talk to you about his favorite year in baseball. I could ask him to sit down, and because the HoloLens has spatial awareness, he could sit down. The games in the HoloLens, the little characters run across the floor and then jump up on the tables. It's amazing stuff. That's mixed reality. It's really exciting stuff, and guess what? I'll make some bold predictions at the end, but this will be available for the common developer. AI is so broad and so hard to describe, but in our world, it has a lot to do with machine learning and catching exceptions and throwing algorithms at problems. The combination of the two, I will show you, solve a lot of really interesting use cases. So I have 2 2-minute videos. I want you to watch very carefully in these videos so we can critique them heavily. You with me? These aren't like rah-rah videos. We're going to critique them. Here we go. I could swear I had it queued, but maybe not. Bear with me. I know how to use Windows. Okay, here we go. This? Yes. All right. Anybody notice the 100 things that were wrong in there? Firstly, are there any surfers out there? No surfers? There's got to be at least somebody with surfing background. The skag on the surfboard were like 1/10 of the size they're supposed to be. Did you notice the McDonald's thing with the burger? Clearly we're too cheap to pay for McDonald's for a Big Mac artwork, right? That's just kidding. At Xenoholographic, we're building a suite of tools for AR to make those experiences real, but that's just a video. When that guy, notice he put regular glasses on, we are a few years from that. We're also a few years from not having to wear glasses, to where augmented reality just happens. The room provides the experience. Right? But if a Tesla catches my attention, did you see that in the video? Right? And I turn and go in the store, I want the engine to explode out of it. And I want all the features to come out of it, right? I want to do this or whatever we do in HoloLens, some type of gesture. That's not in there, so that kind of bothers me. But it is a good testament to where we are. Most of that stuff we can do right now with a little bit of pain. And I'm going to get to where we're going to go and how and why. This is the how. Does anybody in this room recognize this? I don't expect you to, unless you're my age or if you have gray hair. Anybody recognize this? So when I was, okay, we have a few celebrities in the audience that recognize this. When I was marching around the world with Bill Gates, he would do his digital decade speech based on this every time. This is Moore's Law. Moore's Law, I don't care what anybody tells you, is still in effect. What's Moore's Law? Dr. Moore, personal hero of mine I've never met, was the founder of Intel. But when he made this prediction, he basically said, well, I've noticed a trend that where we can cram twice as many transistors on a circuit board. And I see that trend continuing. He later modified this prediction to every 2 years. And it's become uncanny, so uncanny that it's become a law. So uncanny that Intel, AMD, and all the chip makers, all the GPU makers actually do product planning anticipating twice as many transistors on a CPU. They just assume people will figure out how to do that. Intel didn't even exist when Dr. Moore created this. Why do we care? Because those hardware guys and gals, we follow them in software. Ultimately, we catch up. We're not really caught up to them yet, but ultimately we catch up. Now that you have a grasp or you remember what Moore's Law is, guess what this is? Stare carefully at the top of this curve, the top right, and then the X and Y axis. This is the CPU as mapped against Moore's Law. Do you see that collision course we're on in 2025? It's basically saying that our CPUs will calculate at the speed of the human brain by 2025. We're currently faster than rabbits and rats. What does that mean to us? Does that mean machines are going to take over the world? No, that just means they'll calculate as quick as us. In terms of the cloud and the processing power of the cloud, and now that all the cloud services are coming to the edge, that gives us software people an enormous wealth of power. All right, so I show you this stuff because in machine learning and AI, we need a lot of CPU cycles, a lot. And we've made innovations in software just because of this stuff. All right, one more video. I'm going to have to set this one up, though. How do I set this up quickly? For the last 6 months, I have had the pleasure of working with, working in Hollywood with the movie maker people. Amazing people, creatives. I'm an engineer by trade. I'm overhead now, but I used to be an engineer. I used to be a programmer. I've got a black and white personality. These creatives are amazing people. The way you make a movie these days is they basically, in CGI, mock up a scene that'll grab attention, and then they use that with fake actors. They create a CGI little film, and they sell the studios, and they sell the producer, and they sell all that, and all the pieces come together, and out the other side comes Avatar, which is fairly interesting. But you know what's happening in the movie industry? They're hemorrhaging money. They don't make money. The Hollywood accounting, have you ever heard that term? The latest Harry Potter movie lost something like $250 million. Avatar didn't make money. No one goes to theaters anymore because everyone is a millennial, right? The movie theaters are not making money. Their stock's going like this. Hollywood has realized that they need us. They need us. They need software. They need augmented reality experiences to get people excited about movies, to get these millennials paying for movies, to get people in theaters, to make them interactive, to have holographic experiences. So being that said, let me show you this trailer that I'm absolutely not supposed to show you, and darn it, I didn't know I was going to be videoed, so I could get in trouble for this, but that's all right, because we're at DEVintersection, we can break the rules, right? So let me show you this, and then let me tell you where this thing is going. 2 minutes.
You built this. It'll work.
Isn't that awesome? Oh, jeez. Okay. All righty. Let's see. There ain't no cloud without internet access. You ever heard that? Okay, we may be screwed here. In fact, most of my demos may be screwed. Dare I? You with me? Who says I shouldn't? Backstage, do we have internet access problems? Here, hang on. Oh, no, it's Vimeo. Vimeo's down. Oops, that one worked. Hang on. I got to show you the end of this because you'll have to believe me. Wow, it crashed. That's interesting. Okay, we'll skip forward a little bit. Here we go again.
I love you, Rachel.
Worked. She jumped.
Okay, Rachel. Now you come back.
Where do you think she is?
When do you think she is?
What's going on, guys?
Get away from the track!
We did it! Rachel!
We have to get out of here.
Michelle! Edward!
I don't know what the hell the stone has to do with anything, to tell you the truth. This movie is targeted for, one might speculate, this movie is targeted for summer of 2019. And these people in Hollywood are counting on an augmented reality experience, maybe a mixed reality experience. The bad guy in the black ship and the good girl in the white ship, they're counting on those ships coming from behind the movie theater and roaring over your head and then somehow transitioning to the screen. They're counting on the stone landing in the aisles. They're assuming there will be lightweight, comfortable, inexpensive glasses for people to wear in the movie theater. Those are starving actors. The actors that'll be in their place would be George Clooney's or Brad Pitt's, or I'm not much of a pop culture person, but famous actors. They're counting on us to do this type of thing. I find that interesting, and it's just so fun to be able to work with these people. Now let me see if I can transition to how we're going to get there. So, Microsoft has this group of brilliant people working in the cognitive services group. I'm mostly, in fact, entirely going to focus on the vision set of APIs tonight. 30 solved problems by just a large, brilliant group of people. There are a collection of artificial intelligence APIs that allow systems to see, hear, speak, understand, interpret our needs, using natural methods of communication. They're REST APIs. That's all they are, which means they're technically cross-platform. You can call them in your platform of choice, whether it be in Python or in UWP or in some type of client-side web technology, doesn't matter. They're easy, they're free to use for developers. And frankly, they're cheap in production. It's an amazing set of technology. Oh, I lied, I have one more video, which is why we do this. You may have seen this before, but it's so freaking compelling, I can't help but play it again. And that's this one.
I'm Saqib Sheikh. I lost my sight when I was 7, and shortly after that I went to a school for the blind. And that's where I was introduced to talking computers, and that really opened up a whole new world of opportunities. I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a software engineer. I love making things which improve people's lives. And one of the things I've always dreamt of since I was at university was this idea of something that could tell you at any moment what's going on around you.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
I teamed up with like-minded engineers to make an app which lets you know who and what is around you. It's based on top of the Microsoft Intelligence APIs, which makes it so much easier to make this kind of thing. The app runs on smartphones, but also on the Pivot Head smart glasses. When you're talking to a bigger group, sometimes you can talk and there's no response, and you think, is everyone listening really well, or are they half asleep? And you never know.
I see two faces, 40-year-old man with a beard looking surprised, 20-year-old woman looking happy.
The app can describe the general age and gender of the people around me and what their emotions are, which is incredible. One of the things that's most useful about the app is the ability to read out text.
Hello, good afternoon. Here's your menu.
Great, thank you. I can use the app on my phone to take a picture of the menu, and it's going to guide me on how to take that correct photo.
Move camera to the bottom right and away from the document.
And then it'll recognize the text. Read me the headings.
I see appetizers, salads, paninis, pizzas, pastas.
Years ago, this was science fiction. I never thought it would be something that you could actually do. But artificial intelligence is improving at an ever faster rate, and I'm really excited to see where we can take this. As engineers, we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, building on top of what went before. And in this case, we've taken years of research from Microsoft Research to pull this off.
I think it's a young girl throwing an orange frisbee in the park.
For me, it's about taking that far-off dream and building it one step at a time. I think this is just the beginning.
I still think that's awesome. That was from 2 Microsoft Build conferences ago. Saqib is a real engineer, and he does a presentation on how he codes in Visual Studio. Yeah. That you really should check out. And I show you this because this was 18 months or so ago. It's kind of smoke and mirrors. At the time, the state of machine learning, he could see about 86 objects. I think that's a girl with a yellow frisbee. Remember that? 86 objects. A blind person needs to see 2 gazillion objects to really see, right? Right after that, the Microsoft team made some innovations that got us to 2,000. That's still nothing. Cut to today, there's a technology I'll demo live for you that is almost unlimited in the amount of objects we can recognize because of how much processing there is in the cloud, because of how many smart people are working on this problem, and because of this cognitive services API. That is freaking compelling and awesome. So let's keep pushing so we get to some live demo. So my wife thinks that robots are going to take over the world. So did Huxley, so did Orwell in their books. You know, machine learning for me is finding anomalies. And I use tools. I'm not a machine learning expert. I didn't go to school and study cognitive science, but I know how to call a REST API like you guys. Machine learning to me is finding anomalies in a ton of data. Why is a Asian population of millennials buying Perrier 2 to 6 p.m. in the Chicago market? Right? That's an anomaly. I'll give you some other anomalies too. It just means we're going to get more and more tools that do the painstakingly hard stuff that's so hard to do now. So I show you this because this stuff is so powerful. As developers, and I assume most of you are developers in the audience, we have a responsibility. Our tools are so powerful that, let's face it, they can be used in the wrong ways. You know, ransomware and computer hacking and stuff is real. We have to be responsible with all this stuff. These two authors portrayed a world run by machines. We're not going to have a world run by machines, but we do have to be responsible about what we do. So speaking of responsibility, stare at this for a second. Where'd I put that? Yeah, there we go. Can you see that? Is that large enough for you to see? Feel free to say no. I can barely see it from here. I'll assume that's big enough for you to see. How about if I go like this? I don't have a lot of resolution here for these big screens. Really? It's getting bigger, but Power BI is smarter than me. This is Power BI. Let me just describe what you see on the screen. I can pick a customer here. Darn it, these are real customers and I'm being videoed. Check out here, age range by store. Look at all those millennials shopping at what is essentially, this is the, I can't say their name out loud. You know that really expensive champagne that no one of us can afford, yet when people come to Las Vegas, they drink it? That's this company, that French company. Look at all those millennials buying that fancy champagne. Look at how long they're engaging with the advertising and how happy they are doing it. Look at how long they stare at the advertising. And look at that bell curve. I'm 55 years old, right? I'm the ignored demographic, white, male, 50 to 60. We're an ignored demographic because we're not influenceable. We're that get off my lawn type of generation. If Beyonce drinks Diet Pepsi, I really don't care. But millennials do, especially that one targeted demographic. How in the world are we capturing all that stuff? I'll show you live in a minute here. This is real. You've seen how human populations can be influenced over the last 3-4 years, not only in our presidential elections, but in a consumer way. We're constantly being influenced. We aren't. We're the technology elite. You don't care if Beyonce drinks Diet Pepsi, do you? Well, the majority of the world does. Humans are typically very influenced by advertising, engaging advertising, interaction, things like that. So this is real. It runs in grocery stores and 7-Elevens and C-stores all over the world. Especially here in Las Vegas, you're going to see cameras everywhere. Especially after our tragedy a few weeks ago, cameras are everywhere. Privacy law is changing because of all this, especially if it's in a security context. In this context, it doesn't know who you are, but it knows that you go to Safeway on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock and are in front of this particular cooler buying this thing. And it knows that if beautiful white people are drinking champagne in the advertising and another race steps in front of it, it turns automatically into beautiful Asian people drinking champagne. That's wildly effective. That's how crazy Big Brother this stuff is. Remember, you're the technology elite. You don't build software for yourselves. You build for these type of people. Let me show you the engine that runs behind the scenes. What do we call that? What do I call that? I call that golden trout. So let me set this up a little bit. This is not styled. This isn't prettied up for a reason. This essentially is a test container. This is the engine that runs behind all the stuff we do with the face. In the grocery stores, it's not just about profiling and demographics so they can be upsold from Fritos to champagne. It's looking for the bad guy. It's looking for Amber Alerts, stolen children. And in some cases with facial recognition, it does loyalty. We're gonna, for demo effect, my computer up here is a Surface Book, which is a wildly, grossly overpriced, very powerful Microsoft computer. It has a 3D camera in it, because it does Windows Hello, right? I don't have to log in, it just looks at my face and logs me into Windows. Amazing computer, just grossly overpriced. I'm not gonna use its camera. I have what is essentially a $4 camera. It's been, the AV guys taped it, so I can't hold it up to you. Did you know that the camera in your iPhone or your Android device is $4, about $4 at quantity? Did you know that? Apple builds beautiful software around the camera, but the camera itself is about $4 in quantity. So I'm using a $4 camera, which has a housing and a USB interface, which takes it to 20. Why am I telling you this? I want to demo in the worst case scenario, right? I'm not going to use the fancy camera. I'm going to do the cheap one. And then, well, shoot, let me just get this rolling. I'm calling the API every 2 seconds. Oh, ouch. Did you see that 69 count? Oh my God. Now, it should, under the right lighting, God bless it. Yeah, there we go. There's machine learning behind this. So we're grabbing a frame out of the HD feed. HD is 30 frames per second. We're grabbing a single frame every 2 seconds, sending that to the Cognitive Services API. You can see that it nailed me in facial recognition pretty quick. I smiled, so it says I'm happy. If I can, go like this, it'll tell me I'm angry or contempt, things like that. So of interest, look at that control on the right-hand side. Out of the Cognitive Services API, we're getting 7 metrics of emotion. As software people, we don't pretend to make assumptions about if your anger is at 2% and your contempt is at 7% and your happiness is at 70, you're psycho. We don't make those assumptions. There are entities with psych backgrounds that do make these assumptions. Propensity to steal, propensity to commit suicide, terrorism, things like that. That's why we use an emotional metric. I do know that when my wife has yelled at me, my contempt factor goes up. And she wasn't really happy about me being on a business trip during Halloween. So that would explain my contempt at 3%. Is that 0.3? Yeah, 0.3%. No, I have no contempt. Cool, huh? Imagine a world where we can go at surveillance cameras, cheap surveillance cameras that are installed everywhere, and just grab a frame here, grab a frame there, looking for the bad guy. Hold on to that thought, because this is about faces. It gets a lot better than that. All right, so let me let go of that, and then we'll press on, and I'll show you the really good stuff that I'm so excited about. You may have seen this demo. It's another smoke and mirrors demo done at a Microsoft event. Anybody remember this from about 6 months ago? I know you do, because you were there. You probably built it, for God's sakes. This was a really compelling demo that Microsoft did live, the Cognitive Services team did live. Notice it's identifying everything in the room, everything. Not faces, it's doing object recognition. And then they ended the demo with this actor coming in, picking up the jackhammer and doing a selfie. And it identified that he's not trained or capable or whatever, allowed to pick up the jackhammer, and it sent a security alert. Man, talk about Big Brother. I would not want to work at this company, but nonetheless, that's wildly powerful. You know what the problem is? Remember I told you about the 88 recognized objects, and then 2,000, and then pretty much now it's unlimited. This was at the 2,000 mark about 9 months ago at Build, which means Microsoft had its own private cloud, hundreds of servers, hundreds of cameras, tons of processing pulling off this live demo. Not realistic for us, right? It wasn't a REST API, total custom solution, but it gave us a great sense of what's coming in the future. And this type of thing is coming. So this is what I just want, this is the only thing I wanted to show you tonight. This is the best kept secret at Microsoft, at least in the Azure stack. This is called, I think we'll do two. This is called Microsoft Custom Vision, the Custom Vision API in Microsoft Cognitive Service. It should be called Awesome because it's the object recognition API. It's a portal that does machine learning. It machine learns the machine learning objects for you. I should just show you that before I show you the live demo. So, well, no, how about I do it this way? So I'll do the cheapo camera today. Have a Coke and a Pepsi. In retail, we look for Cokes and Pepsis and Budweiser and stuff like that. But the demo gets better. So here we go, cheap camera. I probably will have some shine on the Coke can, which I do. And you could see immediately, it's just calling the REST API in Microsoft Cognitive Services for Custom Vision. And it's like, yeah, I'm 99% sure that's a Coke. That in itself, I hope you agree, is freaking awesome. It's just a REST API. So we're beyond faces now. Faces are a commodity. We're talking about recognizing objects. And you would imagine that thank you. Got a little bit scared there for a second. You would imagine that it does a good job on Pepsis and stuff like that. Now, let me show you why that's amazingly cool. This is the Custom Vision portal on the Azure websites. You can see that I have 41 pictures of Coca-Cola in here. I have 32 pictures of Pepsi's bottles, and I have 34 pictures of Pepsi cans. That's it. To pull off Shakib, the engineer's seeing eye thing, the blind guy, that took hundreds of thousands of images and thousands, tens of thousands of machine hours. When I upload, and I uploaded something last night, and I'm going to do a demo tonight here for the first time, it took me 10 minutes to grab pictures off the internet, and I click train, and it does the machine learning on my machine learning objects, creates the physics meshes, so I have something to compare against. That's it, right? One might speculate that right now, this has a cloud dependency. One might speculate that in a couple weeks, there might be some announcements about doing this type of stuff on the edge. For security, we need to do this stuff on the edge. We can't look for the bad guy in the cloud because, governmental restrictions and stuff like that. So I met this amazing gal at Microsoft, and 2 or 3 months ago, and she in her pregnancy, in uterus, her son had a rare disease that wasn't caught. Her and her husband almost terminated the pregnancy because the fatality rate is 100% on this very rare disease called posterior urethral valve syndrome. Yet they caught it last minute. The problem in a lot of rare diseases is that our physicians aren't trained to see them. If you're trained to see PUV, if you don't mind me calling that from here on in, if you're trained to see PUV, you recognize it immediately. If you're not trained and you don't catch it, it's automatic fatality. Rare disease happens in 2% of males. It's essentially like the blockage of the urethra and the bladder of a baby, right? But it's a very 2D type of problem. So for demo effect, I've changed this to PUV. And for demo effect, I'll use the cheap camera. And I have pieces of paper. This is an ultrasound image. You can't see it, but trust me, it's an ultrasound image of a normal bladder of a male. And then this one is a picture from a cell phone, from an iPhone, of a cheap monitor in a hospital room of Melissa Mulholland's baby. All right? So this is one of those things where I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I build these classifiers and this proof of concept worked, and I'm just so ecstatic, but I have no one to tell because it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, got hold of this and did one of his keynotes, and it brought him to tears because he has a son that the physicians didn't catch the problem when his wife was pregnant, and he has a severely handicapped son. Brought him to tears because he said, this is what Microsoft is about. So, all right, here we go. Cheap camera, piece of paper, and you can see that it's saying, yep, I'm pretty sure that's normal, right? And I take this piece of cheap paper, and you can see it's going to do its machine learning thing, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow. There we go. And it's going to do its machine learning thing, and it's going to say, ooh, I'm confident that that thing has PUV. This is a piece of paper. This technology is going inline, obviously, completely digital in the radiology process, in the ultrasound, in the X-ray, in the MRI. I'm confident that we'll be able to do this at a molecular level, looking for cancers and proteins and things like that. We'll definitely do it in breast cancer, although that's, most physicians are trained to see breast cancer type things. But this doesn't replace doctors. It just helps set the flag. Hey, I think that's PUV. All right. We had a tragedy in Las Vegas. I live in San Diego, California. It's only a 4-hour drive for me to get here, so I say we. We had what is being called a terrorist attack. A bunch of people were killed. One might speculate that the FBI in the next, 6-8 weeks is going to tell you that in the surveillance cameras at Mandalay, this crazy guy is seen loading weapons into duffel bags, loading weapons into suitcases, things like that, under the view of surveillance cameras. Now, picture the security people at Mandalay in a control room with hundreds of screens in front of them. It's just not realistic for them to catch everything, especially if it only takes a couple seconds of view, right? And the FBI, of course, is looking at recorded tape forensically after the fact. This technology has the capability to catch this stuff in real time. We're not quite there yet. I need 6 months. The brilliant engineers that work on my team need about 6 months, but I think we're going to get there. So I have, last night, because I wanted to do this demo for you, I built a classifier for weapons. I have two, I should just show you. I have two, so I'm not a gun guy, but there's this semi-automatic weapon that bad guys frequently used. It's called an AR-15. And I need something that isn't AR-15, so I grabbed a bunch of pictures of pistols. But realize there's only 33 pictures in there for each of them. 2 years ago, I would have to do 10,000 pictures and thousands of hours of machine time to train these classifiers. All right, so they're in there, and I've got my little UWP app. And if the demo gods are with me, I have a picture of a woman holding one of these AR-15 things. This picture is not in my training set. This will be the first time that, well, I did the demo in my hotel room a couple hours ago, but this will be the first time that the computer vision API sees this thing. It's not like it's doing a pattern match or anything like that. Have I set it up enough yet? Okay, so there it is. And you can see right away, I am 99% sure that that is an AR-15. That is freaking awesome. If you don't think that's awesome, I'll meet you in the bar and the drinks are on me and I'll explain to you why that is so freaking awesome. This technology is so powerful, and I want to, the world I want to live in is creating software for good like that. I hope you're as excited about that as I am. And it's a REST API, and it's free for developers. And in production, it's pennies per transaction. Okay, let me wrap this up so we can get the office guys out here. We did that. Are you guys old enough to remember this? God, I hope so. But remember that this was like a video. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my last hope. And remember, it kept playing and it kept playing. I casually mentioned it earlier, but I'm famous at making bold predictions and we're infamous. I was the one who predicted the death of the internet, but every once in a while I'm right. Well, TCP/IP, it's the dumbest protocol in the world. I grew up programming on binary protocols. I didn't know Cisco was going to make a bad thing worse by inventing that router and us getting stuck with HTML and all this stuff. And how did I know that we could do 3D and all this amazing client-side stuff in a web browser back in 1998? But we're close to this. What we can't do, in fact, we're here. The only thing we can't do is we can't be God, and we can't apply matter to a virtual object. If we could, it would send the porno business through the roof. But we can't do that. And my companies will not build that software, I can tell you that. But we can simulate some amazing experiences. I only show you this thing, not because I'm a Microsoft fanboy or used to work at Microsoft, but this is the leader in the space right now. But the space race is on, and competition in our world is a great thing. This team hasn't done, anything publicly for at least a year and a half. But they're working back there and coming out with new and better devices. I think this whole MR thing, especially as it's integrated in Windows, is just going to explode. In fact, I know it's going to explode. I can show you this type of stuff, but really, what the heck? Bear with me. Yeah, let's do this one. There are some brilliant people. Hopefully there's no audio on this. There's some brilliant, are you seeing that? Well, I am, and it's awesome. Hang on 1 second. Oh, God, the new Windows Media Player is just... Did I say that out loud on tape? Okay, I think I need to do that. Hello. There. Now I do this. Now I do this. Can you see that? Please say yes. Okay, good. So one of the largest drug company in the world has invented a device that creates molecules, like a 3D printer for molecules. It's amazing. Any of their competitors can use it for $1 million, plus a portion of their IP. The output of this device is, depending on the molecule, right? It's an aerosol, it's a liquid, or it's a powder. And the scientist walks away typically with a chemical or a molecule compound that is a protein that solves cancer. Cancer is becoming a managed disease on many levels. My wife's a breast cancer survivor. Breast cancer is a managed disease, right? The tricky ones, the ones that aren't, are like pancreatic cancer. Can't figure that one out yet, but they will. We're building the mixed reality front end for this device. The scientists will grab, I'm so beyond my chemistry class in high school in 1980, but we'll grab different things and create molecules, and we have to abide by the laws of chemistry. And they'll model what they have in their head or what they have in formulas, and then essentially they'll say go, and out comes the canister to solve cancer. It's freaking awesome. That's the power of this type of technology. That's why mixed reality is so exciting. Not watching people in a consumer perspective and trying to upsell their Pepsis, but doing real things that make the world a great place. So we're way behind. So let me wrap this up. And for you, tonight, I'm going to make a prediction. But I know this is going to come true. In terms of mixed reality, because of Moore's Law, because I can count on some GPU power that's coming over the next couple years, because I can count on some mixed reality devices to be out there, because I can count on projectors. I can tell you, within 5 years of having this room, of having Tony Gwynn sit next to Zoiner Tejada and interacting with him. Hey, Tony, what was your favorite year? Well, most people think it was, when the Padres were in the '98 World Series, but really it was when I was at San Diego State. That type of interaction through bot technology, and that's without glasses. And the best thing is that these tools, you don't have to be elite PhD with a math background to do this. There are suites like Unity and some other stuff coming that are going to make this realistic for the common developer, which means if you're in the office world, or like I started this presentation saying, this will affect you. You will be doing this. It's just a matter of time. All right. That's all I got. How'd I do on time? I did good on time. Perfect. In summary, this stuff is wildly powerful, it's inexpensive, and it's just going to go, go, go. And it is going to affect your world. Whether you're doing CRUD applications or not, this will affect your world. So, I'm done here. If you want my deck or any of the stuff I got, this is how you can contact me. I'll be here all week. I love talking to you excited developers. You can take a picture of this. You can email me, and I'll send you this deck. Like I said, I was building demos just a couple hours ago, so I don't have my act together to give you a link to download them. But I will give you a link to download them if you email me. I will not save your email address and put it on the list. I don't even know how to do that, nor would I want to do that. And then I believe the conference can provide this stuff to you. So, and you can contact me through those means there. That's all I got. So how about we bring out Mike and Dan from the Office 365 team, great speakers, great guys, to talk a little bit about Office Dev for you. All right, so stay right there. Dan, Mike, come on out.
Thank you so much, Tim.
My pleasure. Go get them, boys.
Thank you so much, Tim. The vision and the technologies that Tim shared with you are truly astounding, and they're, as Tim mentioned, available to us today. And you're going to see some real code in just a minute that takes advantage of some of the intelligence and artificial machine learning that Tim alluded to. All of this is part of a digital transformation. We all know we're going through it. What it means for all of us in this room is incredible opportunity, because the digital transformation is changing the way people live and work, the way we relate to technology, the very way we integrate technology into our lives, much of which Tim showed you. In the world of work, CEOs believe that this digital transformation is the #1 trend that will impact their business. It's going to transform their business more than anything else, and it will mean the difference between success and failure. From a pure monetary perspective, if you're wondering who's going to be paying for these kinds of technologies and these transformations, business certainly will be leading the way. Because those companies that not only seize the digital transformation, but execute it well, will be incredibly successful. You can see here, the studies suggest that the digital masters will be seeing revenue increases of 9%, profitability increases of 26%. And while those numbers are significant on their own, look at the difference between those and those who fail. Those companies who fail to take advantage of these trends and fail to transform, -4% revenue, -11% profitability. This is one of those tipping points that will mean the difference between success and failure for many, many businesses. Those businesses that seize the opportunity for digital transformation will apply these technologies across 4 major business outcomes: engaging customers, empowering employees to do more, optimizing the business itself, and actually transforming products. And we see case studies of this throughout all kinds of businesses, from IoT solutions that improve agriculture to collaboration solutions that save lives in pharmacology, healthcare, defense, and other industries, to artificial reality that makes learning more effective for students around the world. So we see this happening today, and we want you to be part of it. And to be part of it, you need to understand what Microsoft is delivering to our customers to power their digital transformation. Microsoft 365 is our flagship offering that gives our customers the best of what Microsoft has: Office 365, Windows 10, and enterprise mobility and security, so that data can be accessed securely across devices. And as you know, these capabilities do, in fact, apply across devices, from the desktop to the laptop to tablets to large screen devices to virtual reality with HoloLens to every kind of mobile device, iOS and Android included. And Microsoft 365 is not just an offering. It's not just a SKU that people can buy from Microsoft. It's how we're engineering our products. We're working more and more together across the business at Microsoft to weave our capabilities together and bring the new values to our customers. A key example of that is the new Windows 10 Bulk Creators Update, which was released just last week, and brings new capabilities from Office in the form of OneDrive files on demand. So now users can get to all of their files, their personal work files, the files that are shared with them by their teams, right inside of File Explorer on Windows 10. So we're working to bring all of our capabilities together. And in Office 365 particularly, those capabilities are comprised of world-class, best-of-breed services. You know Outlook for calendaring and email, Office applications like Word, PowerPoint, Excel for creating documents, OneDrive for being able to access those files on any device, SharePoint for connecting an organization with intranets and content management, and Yammer for connecting across the organization with enterprise social networks that enable communications and engagement. And our newest offering, Microsoft Teams, which is really meant to be the hub for teamwork, where people can come and work on projects and have all of the tools that they need at their disposal, from persistent chat on a new Skype infrastructure, to the files they need, to notes, and bringing in applications from across Microsoft's cloud, from third-party clouds, and as Mike will show you in just a few moments, your custom applications. All of these services that we've brought together in the cloud are integrated so that we can take advantage of their capabilities. Microsoft Teams, for example, the files capability I was referring to is actually powered by SharePoint. And you'll see how you as developers can take advantage of these services and the content behind it to really light up the experiences you're trying to power. Behind these services are also some important foundational services that you can take advantage of in your applications. We use Azure Active Directory and Office 365 groups to manage identity and group membership. We have the Microsoft Graph, which not only provides an API surface for you to extend Office, but also provides incredible, intelligent, personalized search, discovery, and intelligent experiences across Office and into your applications. And last but not least, security and compliance that's critical to hundreds of millions of customers around the world that give them the very best security and compliance capabilities on the planet. And all of these are not only why customers come to us for Microsoft 365. They're why they go to you, to use your applications that take advantage of these same services and capabilities, that store content in places that can be secure and compliant. And I want to get off stage as quickly as possible so you can see real code that sews these capabilities together and provides new, powerful business solutions. So with that, let me introduce Mike Amerland.
Thank you, everybody.
It's the middle.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so just to re-emphasize a little bit of what Dan said, there is a tremendous opportunity to build using Office 365. So we have this slide where we talk about all these sort of impressive numbers and that kind of thing. In fact, this was a slide that we created about 6 months ago. It used to say 100 million commercially monthly active users. We're now at 120 million commercial monthly active users. This is 120 million people going to work, using email, using SharePoint or maybe Microsoft Teams to pull together all of their content. And of course, that maybe doesn't matter if it's actually something that's in your organization. But suffice to say, over 90% of the Fortune 500 are using Office 365. They're using some facet of Azure Active Directory. Really, the developer opportunity in Office 365 really presents itself as the API to your enterprise. It exposes so many of the different core services that you're going to want to take advantage of as a developer to get started. Another just cool stat, there's over 8 trillion different nodes of objects inside of Microsoft Graph. These are things like emails and documents and tasks and people that as a developer, of course, you can't access all 8 trillion, but for your organization, it's a considerable amount of data that is key to building enterprise applications. So it's no wonder that Satya, of course, says that one of the most strategic developer surface areas is Office 365. It is that API to your organization. So with that, let's talk about how you as a developer can take advantage of Office 365. I'm going to break it down into 3 areas. First, you can use Office 365 as essentially components in your application. So maybe you don't actually have to surface this thing called Office 365. Under the covers, though, you can use things like tasks and files and the people that exist in Azure Active Directory as building blocks of your application. You can integrate your applications into Office 365. Again, those 120 million people, they're probably using things like Outlook for hours and hours a day. So if you can bring your application into Outlook as they work, you can save them a lot of time, you can make your application more engaging, and you can make your enterprise just that much more productive. And finally, we think that there's a great opportunity to build new applications on top of Office 365. For all of those compliance guarantees and the trust and the fact that it's available everywhere, it makes a very compelling target for you to deploy applications on top of Office 365. So let's start with how you can actually use Office 365 in your application. You can think of Office 365 almost as a set of building blocks. We tend to talk about them in product terms, but you can think of them as capabilities you can take advantage of. Starting, of course, with people and groups. In Azure Active Directory, there's a hierarchy of a company. So, frequently you just want to build a people picker and you need to access a person. Or you want to build a business process and you need to access a person's manager in case you have some sort of approval escalation. Those are available through Azure Active Directory. They are available through the Microsoft Graph. Of course, with Microsoft Teams, there's a new beta graph API so that you can get at the underlying logic of how teams come together inside of your organizations as well. There are conversations across Outlook and groups, of course, mail and conversations in groups, things that you can access and reason over. And in fact, we actually offer insights on top of as well, so that you can get aggregated insights that come from those different types of conversation form factors, if you will. There's communication via Skype, a number of different APIs for doing things like embedding Skype conversations in your applications. Of course, there's things like tasks, calendars, and contacts, the things that you work with inside of Outlook. A task is basically a way to get a human to go do something, so to speak. And so being able to maybe create a task as an output of what your application is doing can frequently be, a really great way to, make sure that applications are really successful in getting work done in a company. Of course, there's files and content, and there's the things like OneNote notes or Word documents as well that are available. These get exposed through Office 365 APIs like OneDrive files and SharePoint files. And then finally, there's two cool ones. There's, in addition to all the content that you can work with, you can work with things like Excel models. So if maybe your finance department has created a very sophisticated model of how revenue should stream throughout your company, you can access that as an API. And in addition, all of the insights that we build for our own applications, like for example, what are the virtual teams that are coming together, who's working with whom just based on the fact that they're sharing files and not based on their organizational hierarchy, that loose collection of virtual teams is available through our Insights API so that you can show every person the most relevant coworkers at every point inside of your application. So the key to this is this API we have called Microsoft Graph. You can start to work with it through graph.microsoft.com. You can see the APIs, you can see all the building blocks. Fundamentally, Microsoft Graph is a consistent, straightforward, REST-based API for accessing all of the data that I just talked about. So as a developer, if you're familiar with posting through JSON to a REST API and getting a result back, you can work with Microsoft Graph. And as a graph, all these things are interlinked. So for example, if I want to get the files associated with a person, I just say v1.0/email address of the person/drive, and I get their files that they've been working with, if I have permission to them, of course. Now there's other concepts like groups and conversations, and all of this, again, is connected through a layer of insight. So being able to connect, for example, a set of people across not just your Active Directory, but also into your inbox and into, for example, contacts, so that for a particular user, you can show the people that matter to them most. Okay, so let's get started and let's just start looking at some examples. And what I'm going to do is show you ways that you can actually use Office 365 as components in your application. So with that, I'm going to go start off and go over to, let's go start off in Microsoft Teams. Let's go try that. It's been sitting here for a while. So let me go actually to the Teams application. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so what I've done here is I've actually created a graph bot. So this is a bot that you can install into Microsoft Teams. And what it's going to do is actually harness a lot of the data that's available inside of my Microsoft Graph to provide useful functionality. So I can start by just saying, okay, at GraphBot, like this, called GraphBot MA, not very creative name, but I can say, find all the docx files in my Microsoft Graph. And what this will do is it'll actually take those Graph APIs behind the scenes. It will then go and find them for me. So, try that again. Let's see. Let's try this one more time. Let's see. Graph, oh, it's just taking a while. Okay, so here you can see that what it's actually done, it took a little bit of a while to wake up, but it actually pulled down a set of documents that I had been recently accessing. There are things like my bike maintenance tips document that I've been working on. This is all based on what's the closest to me, what's most recently used, what's been shared with me. Now I can just say other things too, like at GraphBot MA, when is my next meeting, like this. When is my next meeting? And what this will do behind the scenes is then go into my calendar API and look and search for, here's the next meeting that you have on your calendar. That's available to it. Now, a really cool thing it will do is if I want to go ahead and schedule a meeting, let's say I want to schedule a meeting with my colleague, Ben. I can say, schedule a meeting with Ben. Schedule a meeting with Ben, like so. And what this is going to do is it's first going to start by saying, find all the Bens. I didn't say Ben Johnson or Ben Jones or, I have actually a number of Bens that I've been working with. In fact, it's actually going to use a little bit of fuzzy logic to try to find the most relevant set of people who might be called Ben. Maybe I made a spelling mistake and I meant Bernie rather than Ben. So in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to call the People API that's going to span across all of my documents and content and find the relevant Bens. In this case, I want to go schedule a meeting with Ben Summers. And what it'll then do is it'll take our two calendars and join them together, if you will, and find some available meeting times that work for both of our schedules. So in this case, I can say, well, let's go schedule it for Halloween morning. And what this will do is it'll then go ahead and schedule a meeting into our calendar. And so if I come back to my calendar, hopefully what you should see is now we've actually got a meeting behind the scenes That's, yeah, 8 a.m. It says testing, please ignore. But that's that 8 a.m. meeting that I just went ahead and scheduled. So let's just take a very quick look at the code behind this. Now, if you've ever programmed a bot before, you know that it's basically a very simple thing. It's basically like this web service, kind of endpoint called an intent. And then you have a language model that's layered on top of it that basically routes human inputted text into these intents, which are essentially implemented like web services. So in this case, I have just this one API called schedule a time. And as I mentioned, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go call this people API. Let me scroll down just a little bit. And it's going to use the Microsoft Graph API. This particular API is actually in beta. But what it's going to do is it's going to take my query string and actually go search through all the people across my contact list, across my inbox, across my directory. It's going to go generate a set of recommended people. And then from there, it's going to go respond to the user and say, which Ben did you mean? Then the next step, of course, is to actually select one. Now, once that person is selected, then we're going to go call this API over here. Let me go find this. Post with auth async. It's going to call this graph API called graph.microsoft.com v1.0/me/find meeting times. So this is calling a function in Microsoft Graph that's going to do some work to try to compute the time. So I don't actually have to go grab Ben's schedule or go grab mine. That logic that we use in Office 365 is now available to you as a developer. So you can get started with that. So this is a great sample because it actually wires the human language into Microsoft Graph, so you can do a lot of very natural things like schedule meetings and the like. Let's go take another interesting bot example. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and actually switch over to my phone. Let's see. So in this case, I'm going to go load Skype. All right, Skype. Okay, so here I've actually got an Excel bot when this comes up. And what I'm going to say is hello, like so, just to wake up and make sure it's nice and toasty. So now Excel is basically typing back to me. And what I can say is, once it comes back, now notice that what it's going to do is this is in verbose mode. So as I actually go and type requests, it's actually going to show me the Graph APIs behind the scenes that it's making as actual calls. So you get a feel for what it's actually doing. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say open equipment sales. Let's try it this way just real quick. Open equipment sales. All right. Cheap gimmick, but let's go for that. So it's going to use voice recognition. I'm going to say open equipment sales. And what's going to do behind the scenes is actually go into my OneDrive for Business. It's going to look for a file that's called equipmentsales.xlsx. And in this case, it's actually loaded that file. So you can see there was one command to say, is there a file called equipmentsales.xlsx? Yes, there is. Okay, now let's go ahead and open up the first worksheet. So now I can actually show you some data. Let me go back to the keyboard. I'll just do this a little bit more quickly. So I can say show. I think my typing is actually less reliable than my voice. But yeah, I'm going to say show King County. So this is equipment sales for some counties in Washington State. What it's going to do is it's going to go look for a named range. And in this case, it's going to go show those different types of named values for that particular named range in there. Now that's kind of okay, but what I can do instead is maybe just show, I've got a chart called sales performance inside of my as a chart that's inside of that spreadsheet. And so here it's going to go look for the spreadsheet, and then it's going to go return me an image. And so I can see, okay, here's an actual image of my sales performance. It's a chart that came from Excel, and the Excel Graph API was able to return that for me. So now, finally, I can say, okay, set my King November 17 to, let's say we did 25 million in sales that year, 1, 2, 3, like so. So now it's actually going to update the spreadsheet, and the bot's actually doing like a co-authoring session with Excel. So if I was actually sitting inside of Excel, I'd see that number just flash in front of me. And finally, just to go back to this, let's go show our sales performance. And so now what you should see is rather than there being kind of a decline at the end of the year, you can see the chart down there was a little bit declined. Now that we've updated our sales performance, hopefully what you should see is that now it's actually on an uptick. So using Excel, using the bot, the Microsoft Graph APIs, and connecting them to a bot, now you can see how you can use Excel as a calculation engine inside of your applications using Microsoft Graph. So just a very quick preview of that. Okay, moving along. So The final sample I just want to show is just a very quick one. And it's not a very cool demo. It's not very, it's a little plain, but I like the idea of it quite a lot, so we'll see what you think. But let's imagine for a second that we're a realtor, right? And so we want to work with different properties that we have, inside of our that we're trying to sell. So, that's an intensely collaborative kind of process. I'm working with other realtors, I'm working with the customer, I'm working with potential buyers. And so there's going to be a lot of conversations, there's going to be a lot of things I have to do, there's going to be a lot of collection of files and contracts and those kinds of things. So in this case, what we've created is an application for those realtors that helps them with that collaboration. It's called Property Manager. Now the first thing I'm going to have to do is sign in. So it's going to take me to a standard authentication dialog. I'm going to sign in with my developer Office 365 tenancy, which, by the way, if you go to dev.office.com, there's a developer program there, so you can get your own developer tenancy so that you can muck around with it and play with it and destroy things. It's definitely highly recommended. But in this case, I'm going to go log into my real estate application. And so what you'll see here is the list of properties that the realtor has to go ahead and sell. So you'll see a number of different addresses. And in this case, I've got one particular property called 720 Thompson Road. I'm going to open that thing up. And again, not the most visually impressive type of real estate application, but you can see some very basic properties about the property, how much square footage it has, how many rooms it has, how big is the lot size. But there's also a conversations tab. So I can say, hey, everyone, it's sold, like this. And I can go into files, for example, and I can take a look at maybe some pictures that someone took. In this case, it's a scenic picture of the background. I can upload a new file if I so choose. And then finally, I can do other things as well, like I can go ahead and create a task. So I can say, sign final contracts like this. Well, of course, the punchline to all of this is that this is using Office 365 under the covers. So if I actually go back into my Office 365 site, there's actually a SharePoint site that automatically got created because when I first created that property, the code behind the scenes created an Office 365 group. Every group has a SharePoint site. It has a planner task board. It can have team conversations. And so now when I come back to my SharePoint site, you can see that that file that I uploaded, the picture of the house, that I uploaded through the app is now actually in my Office 365 site. So there's a beautiful picture of that house. But I can also go ahead and let's see if I can pull this up. I have so many accounts that it actually exhausts my cookie length. But I can actually go into Planner. Let's see if I can do that really quickly. Try that. So the other benefit of this is that, well, okay, what you would see if I could log into Planner is you'd see a task board. Let me just come over here. Let's see. Try this. Different browser. Fewer cookies in my token. Let's see. All right, let's go over to Planner. So the other benefit of this is that there's a task board here for 720 Thompson Road, and all those tasks that I've been creating are now exposed in Planner. So these are all straightforward APIs that allow me to push in those tasks. I can use Planner as my for example, my Kanban board for moving tasks across and working with that. So the benefit of this is that rather than building your own database of tasks or building your own database of files, you can actually just go ahead and use Office 365 APIs. And then the benefit is, all this is stored in the Office 365 cloud that the customer already has. Using tools that they already are probably working with. There's mobile apps, of course, for Planner and for SharePoint and for working with conversations and groups and those kinds of things. And so the user gets this double benefit of you're using the Office 365 tools they're familiar with. You don't actually have to worry about persisting them. It's a very straightforward experience. So maybe you don't expose all three of those tabs inside of your application, but think about, does my application need a task functionality? Does it need the ability to have conversations? If so, you can incorporate them into your application using Office 365. Okay, so one final example of how to get started. So the first thing that you're going to do if you want to work with these technologies is just use Microsoft Graph. And you can get there through graph.microsoft.com, like so. And when you do that, you'll find that there's actually a tool up there called the Graph Explorer. Now, the Graph Explorer I find to be a really great way to get started and experiment with things. What you'll see is a number of different APIs on the left-hand side that you can experiment with. You don't even have to have a tenancy. It'll log you into a read-only demo tenancy if you don't have one. And then you can start to work with the APIs. You can run queries, and you can see what the results are. And here you can see that for this particular account, you get some JSON information about the profile of the person. So that's pretty cool. I recommend you go to graph.microsoft.com and take a look. But just to show you a little bit of a 101, this is a very simple, basic application. It's implemented with Xamarin. So with Microsoft Graph, of course, we have REST APIs, but we also have SDKs for a number of major platforms, of course, including .NET, but also things like Ruby and iOS and Android, a number of different platforms. So in this case, this is just the 101 getting started with Microsoft Graph. And so in this case, it's a Xamarin form. It's in a UWP. I'm going to log in again one more time, micam.onmicrosoft.com, which is my demo tenancy. And so once I do that, it's just going to pull back some very basic information behind the scenes that sort of summarizes who the currently logged in user is. So to build an application using Microsoft Graph, you need to do three things. First, you just go to apps.dev.microsoft.com and register for an application identifier. That's your sort of your application identifier that you're going to use to sign in with. You typically specify a set of permissions in a redirect URI. Then in code, let's go take a look at the code for this one. The first thing that we do is we use a library called the Microsoft Authentication Library, or MSAL, sometimes called Microsoft.identity.client. And essentially what we do here is we say, let me go zoom in, sorry about that. What we do is we say, okay, step one. Step one is basically to say, Step one is basically to say, if we're already logged in, go get an authentication token, because this is the thing we could go make REST requests with. Now, if we aren't logged in, then there's a separate call called acquire token async, which will do the work to pop up that web-based dialog that you saw me log into. If the user successfully signs in, we get an authentication token, and then from there, it's really easy. It's just make some outbound REST requests. So here I'm just going to call graph.microsoft.com/v1.0/me, and then from there, I'm going to go, once I get the response back, I'm just going to take that JSON response that I get from Microsoft Graph, and I'm going to go update my Windows form, my Xamarin Forms APIs with that information. So in this case, if I want to go extend this example a little bit further, I'm just going to paste in some additional Xamarin Form XAML like this to show some additional bits and pieces of information. And I'm going to come back to my code, and I'm going to add just a little bit more. Let me stop this. I'm going to add just a little bit more code here. That's going to go call some additional APIs in SharePoint. So graph v1.0/site/micam.sharepoint.com. It's going to go reach into a specific site. It's going to go grab a set of SharePoint list items, and then it's going to go display them dynamically. So in this case, let me go start this application. And so now my very basic application will boot up. You can imagine this running in Android. You can imagine this running in iOS. For the sake of expediency, I'm just doing it very quickly as a UWP. UWPs are pretty cool. Now, I already signed in, so when I first come in, it's going to automatically sign me in. So basically what you see is it pulled down some information about that SharePoint site, and then I have a set of SharePoint list items that represent organizations that it's going to display inside of a list control inside of my Xamarin Form. So maybe not a very pretty application, but you can see how easy it is to get started with Microsoft Graph. There's Xamarin libraries, it's basically REST, and then there's an authentication library, and you're off to the races. So that's a little bit of how you can actually start to use Office 365 as components. But next up, what I want to show is, let's see. There we go. How you can actually integrate into Office 365. So again, remember, there's people using Outlook, there's people using Excel and Teams, and it can be really beneficial if you actually pull in your experiences into those applications so that people have the right tools close at hand so they can get their work done more quickly. So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this, but across Microsoft Office, whether it's SharePoint or whether it's Word or whether it's Excel, our basic goal is to make every interesting extensibility point available to you as a developer to go extend. And we do this by basically letting you embed web code, whether it's an iframe, whether it's your own custom JavaScript, whether it's very simple markup, into various different spaces. So in Word, for example, you can go ahead and have a task pane with tools that are implemented as a web page. In Microsoft Teams, you can have a tab. In SharePoint, we have always had a great way to extend it through something called web parts, little blocks of HTML that you can embed inside of a SharePoint page. Now, all of these get connected to either product-specific APIs or Microsoft Graph. There's also ways to add extensions in addition. So really, we have a number of different shapes for you as a developer to go extend into SharePoint and across Office 365, whether you're building new tools or whether you're just embedding, for example, some existing content like a dashboard into those Office applications. So just a very quick example, let's talk about Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to come back to my browser. Let's see. All right, let me go to my other browser where my tokens are a little healthier. Okay, so I'm going to go to teams.microsoft.com, like so. And I'm going to use another account, so mikeamm.microsoft.com. Okay. Oh, didn't seem to work. Okay, let me just try that one more time. Okay. Oh, all right. Well, let's try it differently. Okay. I'm going to come into my Teams application here where I'm already signed in. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come to a conversation that I've been having. And so what you can see here, if I go into my marketing team, what you can see at the top is there's a new tab called Supplier Organizations. So the idea behind this is our marketing team, we're having lots of conversations. We have some tools, for example, we can integrate apps like Planner into Microsoft Teams. But as a developer, what you can do is also integrate Microsoft, your own sort of web logic and your web controls into Microsoft Teams as well. So in this case, I created a web page that I have embedded inside of Microsoft Teams that pulls in our set of organizations that we work with. And in this case, behind the scenes, what it's actually doing is it's using some of that same code to call into SharePoint, to go retrieve a set of documents, and to go retrieve a set of list items. So it's just a very simple integration that you can build into your applications. It's essentially just a web page. Let me go see if I can pull that up very quickly. This is just the implementation of that web page. You can see that other than some Microsoft Teams APIs at the top here, Microsoft Teams.initialize, it's really just a standard web page. In this case, what I do is I call into Microsoft Graph. So I've defined my tenant, I've defined my application identifier, some redirect URIs. This is just some simple JavaScript that I'm actually hosting on Azure blob storage, so it's really simple. And then from there, as with that Xamarin sample I showed you, the first step is just to authenticate and let people sign in. And then once I get my authentication token back, let me go page down just a little bit. Sorry, I'm going a little fast. Let's go down one more time. You can see that, okay, once I've got a sort of a token and the user signed in, what it's going to do is it's going to just make some simple AJAX requests to the Microsoft Graph endpoint /v1.0/sites/site ID/lists, and actually go retrieve list items and start displaying them in line inside of the HTML. So again, whether you're using JavaScript or .NET, you can really get started with Microsoft Graph just by making some JSON requests. Now I want to show you one other thing that's kind of a cool other interesting way to integrate with it. So I'm back here and I'm looking at my organizations, and maybe I see this Wingtip organization. I want to find out more details about it. Well, Wingtip is an organization that maybe I'm not working with, but I want to go connect with a person on my company who is working with them. So I'm going to click this button called Connect with Account Owner. And so what this is going to do is it's actually going to go send an email to that account owner asking, do you want to let this person go use this particular site and work with this particular organization? So let me show you what this looks like, though. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to send an email, but it's going to use a capability called actionable messages. So rather than just sending an email with a hyperlink where the person has to click the link and go sign in and go through all the different types of context switching and those kinds of things, which can really destroy productivity, what they're going to get is an actionable message. So you can see one right here, and in line right within the message is basically a miniature form. So in this case, you can see that maybe somebody has requested information about my vendor, and it's up to me to decide, do I want to let them have access to them? Do I want to maybe talk with them about what their requirements are with the vendor? So I can actually build my workflows right into Outlook with these forms called actionable messages. So in this case, for example, maybe I could schedule a meeting. I could choose a different date. So there's a set of controls that you can actually embed inside of these emails. You can then say, maybe I can approve it, say request approved, like so. And when I click the OK button, what it's going to do is essentially a form post over to a web service that I've embedded inside of this email. So that would update this, and basically my web service would get updated and the user's not even taken outside of Outlook at all. So actionable messages, another interesting way to integrate with Outlook and then keep users just productive and happy and inside of the applications they're using. You can see my chat as well from a little earlier. Okay, I'm going to skip this. Let me just show you this very quickly. So another way is to actually embed inside of SharePoint. So SharePoint is really the home to pages and files and content in Office 365. And we're revamping the user experience to make it simpler, easier to use. Take advantage of modern concepts like being able to have a predominantly client-side user experience, so it's fast and responsive and works on mobile devices. And so it's a really great experience, but one of the hallmarks of SharePoint is that you can always customize it. You can always extend it because a SharePoint team site or a communication site is really the home of a team or an organization. They want to make it theirs. They want to personalize it. And so now you can do that with the technology we have called SharePoint Framework to do things like, for example, embed a header at the top of the page with metadata about that site. Or you can do things like extend the user experience of SharePoint. So in this case, I've got a set of adventures that we're tracking in a SharePoint list. I can add custom actions, for example, to publish this adventure to the public, and that will call up my own user experience, which from there I can go call my own custom web services and the like. And then finally, I can also extend the list experience. So in this case, the location, there's no location control out of the box for SharePoint, but what I did was I extended my site with JavaScript code to go ahead and have a custom visualization of a location. So with SharePoint, you can also now extend it with JavaScript across the site in very interesting and compelling ways. And I'll show you maybe a little bit of how to code that in just a little bit. Okay, and then finally, just one last example. This is just a very simple control that we have called the OneDrive file picker. It's essentially a set of JavaScript that you can embed in any application to allow you to pick files from across OneDrive and SharePoint. So let's go show what this looks like. So I'm just going to sorry. Okay, so I'm going to start IIS. So essentially we have this JavaScript OneDrive control, and what it is essentially is, think of it as a login dialog glued together with a file picker. So you embed some logic at the top of your application. Let me go page up. That basically defines some properties about how this file picker should work. I want to implement a simple way to find a file inside of OneDrive and SharePoint. I want to maybe specify some filters. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, OneDrive file picker control, go open this up. And when it successfully returns, it's going to give me both a list of selected files and an access token that I can use to go call into Microsoft Graph. So it'll sign me in if I'm not already signed in, and then give me a set of files. So if we just take a very brief look at this application. Okay, go to localhost 9999. You can see that this is a very simple markdown editor. I can create a new markdown file if I so choose. Hashtag welcome, like so. And when I'm ready, I can click save. And what this will do is open up the OneDrive file picker. I think I've probably already signed in, so it won't ask me to sign in again. But from what I can do is I can pick a folder to go save this into. Maybe I want to save this into my medical folder. Click save. And now what it's actually done is it's actually persisted that file up to OneDrive. So behind the scenes, what it's doing is it's using those JavaScript REST APIs. It's using a file picker. And you can see how, basically with 20 lines of JavaScript code, you can get started with, building applications that save and load files from OneDrive. So the OneDrive file picker, take a look at it, and then just use the Graph APIs behind the scenes to read and write files. Okay, so last but not least, building applications on Office 365. So, for example, when you think about SharePoint, SharePoint has so many interesting facilities for developers that you can take advantage of. It's got a page infrastructure. It's got a mobile app, and it's designed to be able to be responsive. It's got these things called lists and libraries where you can access files and documents and list items. And we have this new client-side technology called SharePoint Framework, which really just streamlines the process of using modern JavaScript frameworks like React and to some extent Angular and jQuery and other different types of libraries to develop applications in SharePoint. So no longer do you need to use ASP.NET 3.5. You can use new technologies and new client-side JavaScripts to build things inside of SharePoint. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to build an application from scratch on top of SharePoint? Obviously, things like ASP.NET Core and other different types of things like Node.js are great frameworks for building web applications. There are some benefits to building an application on SharePoint, though. First, as I sort of mentioned earlier, it's probably something your company already has. You already have a SharePoint site, and when you have it, there's things like, for example, those rich APIs through Microsoft Graph. It's a trusted cloud. Your IT department's already managing it. They're already doing all the document lifecycle processes on top of it. They're already doing information protection. So if you want a place that's already managed by folks in your company that they already have, that they've already approved and blessed, sometimes building simple applications on SharePoint could be a great way to go. So there's these things, there's these facilities that SharePoint has, this list infrastructure, small, simple, like almost relational type database tables that you can use to structure application information inside of SharePoint. Things like a recycle bin, right? Like you're going to build an application. What happens if a user decides to delete a record? Well, in most applications, when you build it from scratch, the user's kind of out of luck. You've deleted the record in the back-end system. But SharePoint has a recycle bin. And so, when somebody deletes a list item, it just goes into a recycle bin. So if you actually want to restore it, you just go into the SharePoint user experience, you click restore, and it's back. So little things like that can become very handy tools to help jumpstart building applications if you do things like structure them inside of SharePoint. So just to show you that very quickly, I want to show you two things. First, we talked a little bit earlier about AI and sort of the ability to use things like Microsoft Cognitive Services to build really powerful applications. Well, when you combine that with something like OneDrive, where files are stored and where you have those rich graph APIs coupled with webhooks, you can do some pretty cool things. So in this case, what I have in this sample is, let me go find it, excuse me, over here. So I have an Azure function called audio transcribe. And this is essentially a webhook. So it's connected to my OneDrive folder so that anytime something changes inside of that folder, like a new file gets uploaded, my webhook will go get called. So let's go scroll down to the logs. And what I've done here is if I go back to my SharePoint site, I'm going to go back to my root SharePoint site. Let's go to shared documents. So, and let me just pull up, sorry about this. Okay, so I've got a couple of audio files here, some WAV files that are in English and in Spanish. And so if I come back to SharePoint and I drag these files inside of them, again, there's a webhook that's registered against this particular document library. Now if we go back to our Azure function, what you should see is that, as they change, what will happen is this will fire a notification to this Azure function. The Azure function will then go read back into my SharePoint document library. It'll pick out those files. It'll apply Microsoft Cognitive Services audio transcription. It will then go get that transcription and upload it back to my SharePoint. And so what you can see is, if I come back to my SharePoint site, these are the two files that I dragged and dropped in here. Some of the transcription is still happening behind the scenes. But hopefully if I scroll over, oh, it hasn't happened yet. Let me go refresh the page. If I scroll over, you can see that what it's done is it's actually inside of SharePoint, it's actually done that webhook, basically took those WAV files, it sent them off to the service, and it transcribed them. So you can see how you can implement some of the scenarios that were talked about earlier by Tim, where you can actually wire the content that you have inside of your Office 365 site, and you can actually go connect it to those advanced cognitive services because there are those underlying APIs and those webhooks and functions. Okay, so that's using OneDrive as sort of a foundation for kicking off things like document processes. Okay, final demo is how you can actually build new user experiences inside of SharePoint to jumpstart them. So as I mentioned, we have this thing called SharePoint Framework, which just streamlines the process of building new applications in SharePoint. So essentially this brings SharePoint development up to what you're probably already doing anyway. You're writing JavaScript, you're using frameworks like React. And so there's, with SharePoint Framework, a tool, it's a standard developer tool, Yeoman, that allows you to scaffold and create a new project. That project has all the libraries and infrastructure you need to go get started. I already ran Yeoman to go create a new project. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a simple application that allows me to track the list of facilities at my company. So in this case, to develop it, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. And so this is a SharePoint framework web part project that has been scaffolded through Yeoman. And what it did was it created a bunch of out-of-the-box files. For example, there's a facilities webpart.ts. A web part is basically a rectangle, if you will, inside of SharePoint that has custom user experience associated with it. So here I've got my facilities web part, which is implemented in TypeScript, and it extends from base client-side web part. So that's the base class for web parts inside of SharePoint. There's a number of properties, and there's a render method which you can override to determine how these things render. There's a property pane where people can design these web parts and configure them. And so this is the foundation of building a web part. Now, this is a React-based component, and React, if you're not familiar with it, one of the key features of React is a library is a markup language called JSX. Now, in TypeScript, it's manifested as something called TSX, but what you can see here is that the key feature of React is mixing together markup like div tags along with actual code that's contained inside of these curly braces. And so if I actually want to go customize this, it's in some ways kind of like working with XAML, except on the JavaScript side. So in my case, I've got a very basic Hello World web part. I'm going to run a tool called Gulp, which will basically be my command line build tool that you'll see over here. SharePoint Framework contains a number of different tools and debugging experiences to make it easier for you to go develop these web parts. And so what this will do is load up a debug tool called SharePoint Workbench. And so now I can see, when this comes up, it's just a sort of a facsimile of Office 365 of SharePoint. And you can see this is the Hello World web part that SharePoint Framework created for me that's basically scaffolded. Okay, so now if I just want to go build something that's a little richer and a little nicer, I'm just going to go implement some React code over here. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll just paste in a, let's go do this. I'm going to go paste in some imports. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to import from a library we have called Office UI Fabric React, which has a number of, of the same user experience controls that we use inside of Office 365. As a developer, you can work with those. I'm going to import them here. I'm going to add a state definition. State is a way in React to actually track the data behind the scenes that actually powers the user experience. And when state updates, React automatically updates your user experience based on that. I'm going to pass in that iFacilities object, which has my list of facilities. The next thing I'm going to do to this React implementation is add a constructor. Oops, excuse me. Add a constructor. What that constructor will do is just a very simple example. It's going to make an outbound AJAX request, if you will, to go fetch the set of facilities from a JSON file. So it's just data retrieval 101. And then the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to override the rendering to something a little bit more custom. So what you can see here is this is my rendering of this new component. You can see I'm using some div tags here, but then I'm also reusing some React controls to have things like a command bar and a list view. And it's also going to do things like use a responsive grid to actually build out my web part. So you can see this set of controls here. I've got a document card for implementing a preview. And so this web part's now a little bit more richer. So let's go save this out. And so what will happen behind the scenes is that Gulp build tool will actually go pick up those changes and go rebuild it. And so hopefully, if we actually come back to our workbench over here, what you'll see is now we have a much richer web part. So again, now when I actually open this web part, it's pulling down that JSON file, it's pushing that into the React user experience, that markup that I showed you. And as I click on these various controls, they're data bound together so that as I click on them, those things will update. So this is a very quick tour of how it is to develop with SharePoint now. You can take all of your script coding that you love to do, you can bring it into SharePoint, and you can make really rich applications and pages that leverage all the documents and list items and content that you see inside of SharePoint. Okay, so we got started. We built our first SharePoint Framework web part. You can then push that into SharePoint. You can share that out. You can make it available. You can put it on your company's portal page, all those kinds of things. So just in review, we've talked about how you can use Office 365 as components for your applications. These are sort of the building blocks that you can take advantage of that you don't have to rebuild yourself, things like tasks and pages and files, and you can incorporate them into your applications. If you couple it with those things like those AI APIs, the cognitive services, you can build some really powerful applications across all the files and list items that you see. You can do things like just use them in kind of a headless manner inside of your own application. You can integrate your own application into the Office 365 user experience, and you can build completely new applications using Office 365. So if you're not familiar with it, I hope this inspires you to go out and get started to leverage all the things that are inside of your company, maybe build some really cool hacks, start pulling in that data, start processing it with webhooks and graph APIs. And with that, if you want to learn more, just go to dev.office.com. We've got a number of different resources. The Office 365 developer community is really super engaged, so you'll find something called Patterns and Practices, which has dozens of samples that are contributed by the community to help you get started. So for all these different coding samples that I've showed you, there's a lot of samples that are available through the GitHub repositories that are linked from that site. And the final thing I'll mention is go to graph.microsoft.com to actually see all of those core APIs for SharePoint items. So with that, thank you for listening to our talk about Office 365 and AI. I hope you have a great conference and get started building with Office 365. Thank you.